Hello, and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 30, Thursday, November 21st, 2019.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and...
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make thyself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back. I'm your co-host, Courtney, and I am joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Emily.
Hey, Courtney, it is great to be back, and we have been waiting for this episode. Listeners, it's finally here, the number one author that you have requested since we started this podcast.
Yep, you may have heard today's special guests on other podcasts like WDW Radio or our own recent guests from the Sweep Spot. And today we're excited to host Jim Korkis, author of over 25 books about the Walt Disney Company, including his popular Vault of Walt series that chronicles lesser-known stories about Walt and his legacy. The most recent Outer Space edition is the 8th in the series and was released just a few weeks ago. In addition to writing his many books, Jim regularly contributes to online outlets like Mouse Planet, All Ears, and Yesterland, among others, and he's considered one of the foremost Disney historians, and we are so excited to discuss his career with him here today. Welcome, Jim.
Well, thank you so much, but my gosh, that introduction set the bar so high. I should just leave now.
Oh, no, please
While
stay.
I'm still ahead, while it still sounds like I know what I'm talking about, you know. But thank you so much for inviting me on this podcast, because it's so exciting to be able to talk about not just the books, but about the writing, what goes behind doing that, because I will bet that you have many listeners right now who are sitting there and thinking, oh, I could write a book about Disney. You know, maybe I'll do that when I retire or whatever, you know. Everybody thinks they have a book in them, and many people do. And they don't realize they could do it, that there are opportunities out there, and they just need to know how to do it. It's just like if you see a house and you go, oh, I could build that house, but you need to know, well, there better be the infrastructure there. There better be the foundation, the plumbing, the electricity, permits do you have to go through and all that. The same thing applies to putting together a book. It just doesn't come, you know. It just like if you cook a turkey, the gravy just doesn't come, you know. You have to prepare that in order for that to happen. And so I think the two of you ladies are doing a wonderful service by getting that information out there to future authors, because there are so many books about Disney that I would love to read, and one of those authors might be listening right this very minute.
Exactly. And like you said, Jim, we're really excited to talk to you about the writing process. We know you're a Disney historian. Your books share so many of those great stories, but we want to hear your story, and we want to hear about you as a writer. So what we usually ask our writers first is, what is it like for you writing? You have an incredible tenure as a writer, over 25 books under your belt. So Can you tell us about what writing looks like for Jim Korkis, and how has your process evolved over the years as you've written more books?
Jim Korkis hates writing, but he loves having written. Because writing is hard work. And oftentimes my friends will say, well, Jim, you're just a a writing machine. Look at all those books. Look at all those articles that you write and all of that. And I will tell them honestly, I don't know how that happened. Other than I was just persistent. I've over the years I've tried to become more organized. In fact, with the Disney books, I found a format that works for me, so that I can produce about 3 books a year. That so one every 4 months. Whereas some people will spend a lifetime on their books. One of my friends, Paul Anderson, has been working for 35 years on a book about Disney and World War II. Now, the sad thing is that 32 years ago, he had enough material to publish that book.
Oh,
and
goodness.
The reason it hasn't been published is he keeps finding more material. And I said, Paul, you got to get that book out. And he says, no, this will really be the definitive book about Disney and World War II. And so I want to make it, complete. And since he hasn't published, there have been other books that have come out since that deal with certain aspects of Disney and World War II. And they've revealed things that Paul was the first one to discover, but Paul will never get credit for that. And so for you aspiring authors out there, one of the things you have to learn as an author is let it go. When should you just say, okay, it's never going to be enough? I wrote a book about the history of the making of Song of the South, because I thought no one, especially Disney, is ever going to write a book, about that film. And I had material, and I had interviewed animators who had worked on that and all that. I didn't have the complete story, but I felt if I release it, at least it's out there. And Disney history is like this huge jigsaw puzzle, and we all have little pieces. And if we share some of the pieces that we have, that encourages other people to come out of the woodwork and share their pieces, and suddenly you get a bigger picture and you go, oh, wait a minute, that's not a bird, that was a fish. And that's not part of the ocean, that's part of the sky up here. Okay, we can do that. But again, the frustrating thing is the moment, and I spent years and years working on researching Song of the South, because, again, finding information on that was very difficult. And, of course, as soon as the book was released, suddenly other information came out. And it's like, holy cow, how could I have ever, missed this or didn't know that? And, in fact, even last week, I found out a brand new piece of information about Song of the South that has never appeared anywhere else.
Ooh.
Except in this one. And so since I just discovered it, this is an exclusive for the Book of the Mouse Club.
Thank you.
Okay. Podcast. One of the things, and again, I want to tie this in to things that writers can use, is don't just limit yourself to reading Disney books. You need to look at other areas. You need to look at books about amusement parks and about films and about all sorts of other things, because oftentimes there's that little bit of information. And so last week I read the 1962 autobiography by Hedda Hopper. Hedda Hopper was a famous newspaper columnist who specialized in Hollywood gossip and all of that, and she was very popular and powerful, especially in the 1940s. And I have a great fascination with old films. I'm the type of person that TCM was made for. So I'm reading,
Jim.
reading the book, and I knew, because I listed in my book, that Hedda Hopper was one of those advocates in Hollywood who advocated for James Baskett, who played Uncle Remus in the movie, to receive an honorary Oscar. And I knew that, and I knew that she had written, columns about that. But as I'm reading the autobiography, she talks about the night before the 1948 Academy Awards. And I had never read this story before, and I have books about the Academy Awards history and things like this, because there's always something more to know. And so what happened is that some of the Board of Governors did not want to give Baskett the Oscar. And according to Hopper's book, it was because they felt that he played the part of a slave, and so that should not be recognized, And of course, that's one of the things that's most misunderstood. Song of the South does not take place during the era of slavery. It takes place after the Civil War. It takes place during the period of time of Reconstruction. You can see that in the film because Remus goes, "Hey, I'm fed up, I'm packing up, and I'm going." If he was a slave, he couldn't do that. He was property. So anyway, they didn't want to give him an honorary Oscar. And I think some of that was also, there was a racist undertone as well, for that recognition. And so Gene Hirschhold, who was the president of the Academy, and a lot of times people who watch the Academy Awards, there's the Gene Hirschhold Award, and they have no idea who that was. And he was president of the Academy. He argued until 4 a.m. that this award should be given, and he finally gave the ultimatum, and he says, if we do not give him this honorary Oscar, I will stand up at the ceremony and explain the disgraceful reason why. And so the board just gave in, and that evening, actress Ingrid Bergman presented James Baskett with an honorary Oscar for his portrayal of Uncle Remus. And so he was the first black male performer to receive the Academy Award. And then, unfortunately, months later, he passed away due to diabetes. But that whole story, nowhere else, And you went, oh, my gosh. This has been in this book since 1962. How come nobody else has ever found this?
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think it just goes to show that a historian's job is never done. And you're, mostly known as a historian, quite literally wrote the book on being a Disney historian. But we'd love to dig a little deeper into your background and know, how have your previous careers as a school teacher, journalist, and performer influenced your writing and your more recent career?
Well, I think it has very much influenced my writing because it's given me a broader perspective. So as a performer, you see what is going to appeal to an audience. How do you frame that information so that they will do that? And the same thing as a teacher, because you can try teaching whatever you want to try and teach. That doesn't mean that the students are going to learn it.
Of course. You
have to take a look and go, what level are they at? How can I, communicate what I want to communicate so that they will do it? And so one of the things I did as a teacher was to always include some humor, because if people are laughing, their blood pressure goes down, their blood sugar goes down. In fact, I can tell you within 5 minutes when I walk into a work situation whether it's a good boss or a bad boss, and you can tell by laughter. If you go into a work situation and there's no laughter, it means one of two things. Either there's an awful lot of toxic anger, so that people don't feel like laughing at all, or there's an awful lot of fear. They're afraid to laugh because they're afraid what is the reaction going to be from the higher ups. And so work areas that are more productive, there's an awful lot of laughter that's going on. So oftentimes you want to present, in the writing, something that is going to make somebody smile, or go, oh my gosh, because then that opens it up and people are more receptive then to receive and retain information. In fact, Walt learned that from his World War II training films. The military were just appalled at the first training films that Walt produced, because they go, you've got these jokes in here, and they had to rush them out. They put them out. When they did surveys, they found that the Walt Disney training films were more effective because of that humor. What happened is that they received the information and retained it, and also they wanted to see it over again. And so that really transformed educational films, or good educational films, I should say. So when you see some of Walt's later educational films, like the True Life Adventures and all of that, there's all those little moments of humor in there. I think one of the things that has affected my writing is that the fact that I worked on school newspapers, my junior high school newspaper and my high school newspaper and my college newspaper, and I also worked on local newspapers with things like that. And so that formatted how do I present the information. So when people take a look at my books or the articles or whatever, they'll find that there's a fact, and then it's followed by a quote, and then it's followed by an anecdote, and then it's followed by this and whatever. And so there's a sense of variety there. And so it's not that dry scholarship that we often get in a lot of books, that are filled with footnotes and, obscure references and things like that. One of the great influences on me as a writer was in junior college is, you have to take a bunch of different classes, in order to graduate, and so in a bunch of different fields. And so I took a history class because I love history, and this was a history class on Civil War, and it was taught by a Civil War historian. I had absolutely no idea what a Civil War historian was or what they did or whatever. It didn't make any difference. It was just this was offered at the best time of the day, so that after that class I could go to this other class, and then I could go home for the rest of the day. I didn't have to take a class and then hang around for a while and then go take, another class. And one of the things I learned from this teacher is that history is not about dates. It's not about events. It's about people. And it's the story of people, and it's not the story of the president or the general or whatever. It's the story of those day-to-day people who are working through that, and that there are connections. And you have to look for those connections. And in fact, the story he told was one of the ones that was one of those light bulb going over my head moments, was he told a story about the Union general, General Hooker. And one of the reasons he was so successful in his campaigns was that he allowed women, who at that time were called camp followers, to follow, his troops and set up their tent and whatever, and, provided a diversion for his troops. And so they were in a a better mood and the morale, and so and these women were then during the Civil War were referred to as those are hookers women, which is where the term hooker came from. And so it's those type of gosh, wow, this is connected with this is connected with that. That I try to accomplish in some of my writing. And so those who have an idea of a book that they want to write, look at the people. And you can see this in the work of filmmakers like Ken Burns. He creates these series about subjects that I'm at best casually interested in, and I will just sit there enthralled because he's pulled in the letters and these diary entries and all this, and it's about just normal people, at that, and then how this connects with that and how this led to that and how that, and so
I absolutely saw that in your Vault of Walt 8. The Outer Space Edition, in that part 1, Walt and Outer Space, those connections between von Braun and the development of NASA and how Disney fits in that story of pretty much Walt Disney's an integral part of creating, the American Space Program. It's amazing. And all those different voices. And I think as a teacher, most of my students would know Walter von Braun because we watch October Sky, but they don't know anything beyond his background other than, he's a space guy.
Yes.
So hearing those stories is really interesting, and I got a fuller picture. I knew he was German, but I did not know quite the extent of his background.
He was Nazi SS, and he didn't hide from that. And basically, when a lot of people didn't want him to be head of NASA because of that, and he basically said, well, you have to remember where I was. If they came and they asked you to be part of the Nazi SS, you couldn't say no.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with those stories, I want to know, how do you find these stories? So taking Vault of Walt number 8 specifically as kind of a little case study here, where did you start your research for this book? Because you talk in How to Be a Disney Historian, the importance of that research. You just lay out for us how you vary your research with stories, but then quotes, so that it keeps the reader's attention. So where did you start for this book, and what were some obstacles that you ran into along the way?
No. Well, it's very easy. There's a little man who comes by my house every day and opens the door and throws in all this research stuff and then runs away. So,
little leprechaun.
Actually, it's hard work and oftentimes just luck and opportunity. Now, I got a chance to interview Ward Kimball because, again, at one point, I wanted to be an animator. That's one of the ways that got me interested in Disney history. And I eventually became a good enough artist to know how bad I really am. So, moved over into writing. But I got to interview Ward Kimball and about many of the things that he had worked on. And one of the things that he had worked on were those 3 space shows for the Disney television Disneyland weekly TV show, the Tomorrowland segments. And so as part of the interview, he was telling me some information, and I had to be careful. With Ward Kimball, you had to be very careful because he's given hundreds of interviews, and I saw a good friend of mine who's a good writer start off his interview with Ward by saying, tell us a little bit about your career. And Ward just blew up.
Oh,
he
no.
said, didn't you even do your basic research, because Ward had been an animator, he'd been an Imagineer, he'd been a director, he had done a Dixieland band, the Firehouse Five +2. He had done special projects for Disney and all that. So when you go into an interview, you better have at least some basic information to go with. And then this friend of mine made his second mistake. It was like, tell me how you created Jiminy Cricket. And Kimball blew up again because, he has told it dozens of times. So there were, all of those out there that you could find. What my friend should have done was format the question so that there was a different perspective or a different outlook on, why, do you feel that Jiminy Cricket, worked better in this, way, whatever. So anyway, when I was interviewing Ward, I was very careful, and when I talked with him about the space shows, I didn't then go back over the same material that I knew existed out there. Dave Smith had written 2 articles for magazines, Starlog magazine, on the history of those things. So I knew some of the basic background, so I tried to format that, and so I was getting this new information about what was happening, including him telling me the story that he asked Wernher von Braun about, what did von Braun see at Roswell? Because von Braun was working down at the missile base, and at the Roswell incident, they brought von Braun down to, take a look at supposedly the wreckage and all that. That's nowhere else.
That's awesome.
And so, I had all these little bits of information, and it's like, oh my God, I feel, because I had this wonderful opportunity to interview these people, I feel this responsibility to share that information, with other people. And as I mentioned earlier, we all have these little, pieces of the puzzle, and if you share that, that'll help, give you that bigger picture. So I had that. And from other people that I had interviewed, I had little bits and pieces, and I go, well, this is interesting, So I put it together in an article, and that's one of the reasons that I write for a lot of websites, is that is sort of my, rough draft to get it out there so that, I can get some feedback, where people go, well, Jim, you're an absolute idiot. Don Tatum, there's 2 N's in his name, and then also sometimes people will go, my mother used to be a mermaid at Disneyland. Would you be interested in talking to her? Yes, I would. So, you get that out there, and you get a little, and then also, if you get some of that information out there, you get other people coming in and say, well, did you see this? Did you hear about this? Did you know that in Galaxy magazine in the 1950s that Willie Lay, who was one of the experts who worked with Ward Kimball, wrote a 3-page article about, working on, no, I did not know that, let me go try and track that down. Thank heavens for places like eBay,
Yeah.
And thank heavens for places like eBay where people list things and they have no idea
what they are,
whether that thing is valuable or not, so I can get it within my budget. And so you start to build up slowly. And that's the exact same thing I tell people. One of the things I learned about writing a book is you don't have to start at page 1 and then go to page 2 and 3 and 4 right down to your last page. Start with the chapter that and you're excited about writing about. And then and then jump to another chapter that you're excited. And before you know it, you have a bunch of chapters there, and you can shuffle them around. And oftentimes that first chapter that you've written, you're going to go back and rewrite, because now it doesn't work with everything else that you have.
It sounds like filming a movie.
Yes,
but often when you film a movie, you don't go from beginning to end.
Right,
you jump around based off of your resources.
Continuity, right. And again, because one of the things that is most frightening to writers, and it's still frightening to me, is looking at that blank page. How do I start? What am I going to put on that? And I'm working on another book right now, and I'm at that point in this book, and it's the same point that I get with every book that I have written. It's like, why did I ever decide to write about this? I don't know enough about this. I'm not going to be able to verify this information. Nobody is going to be interested in this, Why did I do
Why did I bring this on myself?
Yes, and so you have to be persistent. And so I approach my writing as a job, as work. It's not a hobby. And so every day I will write for several hours. Sometimes I will write for the entire day, but I have to write for a minimum of 4 hours every day. Now, at the end of the day, I may have to just throw away most or all of that I've written. But again, it's that exercise, it's that persistence. And what I also do to help myself, because you're going to get those writer's blocks where you get to that point where you go, I can't think of the right words to say. I don't know how to, oh my gosh, I'm stuck. I don't know what this is and all that. So usually I'm working on, the reason I can get 3 books out a year is I'm usually have the other 2 books roughed out. So I can then jump over to one of those books and start writing, or write an article for Mouse Planet or All Ears or whatever, and it sort of cleanses my mind. And then when I go back, there's no blockage anymore. I can see the direction that I want to go, or I can go, no, that was the wrong way to go. I should just take that out, or I should move this earlier, into this chapter. And so when writing the Outer Space edition, basically it was like, okay, I've got this, and my gosh, what else would I like to know about this? What else have other people written? And the frightening thing to me is that a lot of people have not written, about this. But I was interested in this. Maybe other people would be interested in this. And you talk about Werner von Braun. There is so much, about him. Okay, now let's see what this is like, and how does this connect, with Disney, and why did he, hook up with Disney in the first place, and then why did he come back to Walt in '65, to try and get something started again. And so, you have to do that research. You have to go back and look at newspapers, and you go, yes, Werner von Braun invited Walt Disney out to Huntsville, to the NASA facility there. So you start to dig through Huntsville, Alabama newspapers. Is there any, information about that visit? Did Walt say something to one of the reporters there? Is there a video? That was made? Are there still pictures? Are there information in the Werner von Braun archives?
I'd love to run with that newspaper side and the little pieces of research for a moment there. It kind of sparked another question. You encourage budding historians to collect research along the way, as you've just shared, whether it's newspaper and magazine clippings, brochures, etc. And as you say in your How to Be a Disney Historian book, Disney history is happening every day. I'm really just curious, can you tell us what the Jim Korkis Research Library looks like? Do you save everything? Are you, as you move through a book, are you like, well, I guess I'm done with this?
Well, yes. I can never invite a girl over to my house because it looks like a toy store and a library exploded, and I just maneuver between the piles, in order to get from the living room to the kitchen to the bedroom. Again, I grew up in Glendale, California, and if you love books, and I love books, and not just Disney books, but I have collection of books on comic book and comic strip history, and on vaudeville and burlesque, and fun fact books, and I love the Uncle John readers, and there seems to be a never-ending number of those that are published. When I had to move from Glendale, California, out to Florida to take care of my parents, my mom and dad had developed congestive heart failure, and so I figured I could always get another job, but not another mom or dad. So I moved from Glendale out to Orlando, and anybody who's ever moved knows that that's a traumatic experience, and you have to make that decision. What do I get rid of? And I believed that I could get rid of the furniture because I could always find more furniture, but some of these books I would never ever be able to find again in my life. And so I packed them up already in boxes. And so when the moving company came out to come out and give me an estimate, they saw that these boxes were already packed and all that. And I said, well, there are books in those. Oh, yeah, I'll find. And so they underestimated the weight of the books and the magazines. But again, because companies are like that, they tried to upsell me. And so they figured, we're going to get some extra money here. Here's a little codicil that, you pay an extra $100. And so if we've underestimated the weight, you don't have to pay any more at all. And so, I had never really done a massive move before. So I did that. When they weighed all of those boxes, it was over 3,000 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
Of books and magazines. And that was in 1995, and my library has increased since then.
Oh, goodness. How do we get a library card?
Yeah, because, and again, one of the things is I will love going to book and mortar stores like Barnes & Noble, and they have a remaindered section. So I love, rescuing books.
Oh,
especially at a bargain price, and especially about things that I'm just curious about. So a book on the history of Ghostbusters that normally sells for $60, and Barnes and Noble were closing out a brand new copy at $14. Of course, I'm going to pick that up.
Oh yeah.
And again, every book has some little bit there that will help bring that to you, and sometimes there are obscure little books that you would never think of adding to your collection. For instance, there's a book called Bread and Butter Days, which was self-published by an author in Missouri, and you go, well, why would I be interested in that? This is a guy who grew up as a kid with Walt Disney in Marceline. And so there are 2 chapters in the book talking about being with Walt as a boy and going out fishing and, sneaking out, without telling his dad about, this, that, and the other. So there, again, one of my favorite comic strips in the world is Calvin and Hobbes. And I have ambiguous feelings because it's like, I am so grateful there were 10 years worth of Calvin and Hobbes comic strips. And then on the other hand, I'm just tremendously angry at Bill Watterson, who is still alive, that he stopped that because there were so many more, I think, great Calvin and Hobbes things out there. But one of the things that Calvin tells Hobbes is there's treasure everywhere. And when it comes to books and when it comes to finding research material that you want for your writing, whether it's about Disney or whether it's about comic strips or whether it's about amusement parks or whether it's about presidents of the United States or whatever, there's treasures everywhere, for you to go out and look. And now, thanks to the internet, they are so much easier to locate. When I was growing up, I had to go to old bookstores that were on Hollywood Boulevard or old bookstores that were in Burbank. And sometimes they were just, put on shelves, and, it was just serendipity and fate, for you to go through and try to find. And sometimes you didn't even know what you were looking at. I picked up a novel called The Rat Factory, and I didn't realize it at the time, but it was written by a person under a pseudonym, and he had been an animator at the Disney Studios in the 1930s. And so his novel was a sort of a disguised story of what it was like working with Walt Disney in the 1930s at the Hyperion Studio.
Wow, that's crazy. I really like that bread and butter one you also mentioned. But to move forward, Jim, you've told us a lot about the books now that are on your shelf, which I know Courtney and I just took note of all of those to add them to our library. But your books are in our library. So I want to talk about how your books got to us and got into our Disney libraries. You have over 25 books with Theme Park Press and countless articles in other places.
I had books before that because I started writing in Glendale. And before I was a Disney historian, I was considered an animation historian and a comics historian. And so when I was growing up, animation was huge. And as I said, I had always wanted to be an animator. And so in those days, people were seeing like Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, appearing at bookstores and conventions and Disneyana shows and things like that and talking. And people were just frantic about buying limited edition cells and all of that. And so I was always interested, and again, I had interviewed an awful lot of Disney animators because, again, that was my area of interest. And through that, I met a good friend, John Cawley, who was actually working in production at Film Roman. So he was involved with the Garfield TV series and, so many others. And so we seemed to be a good partnership where I had this larger historical background and he had the production background. So we joined together and wrote a couple of books about animation, and which again, very very funny story is years later, when I was working at the Disney Institute, Pete Docter showed up, and no, not Pete Docter, Joe Ranft, who was the story man for Toy Story and all of that. And when he saw me, he said, "Are you the Jim Korkis who wrote the book, the Encyclopedia of Cartoon Superstars and How to Do it?" I said, "Yes."
Aww.
He says, "I have those in my library. I love it."
So sweet.
It was, and in fact, he did the voice of Heimlich, the little caterpillar in Bug's Life, and so he had me autograph the copies of my book, and I had a book on the art of Bug's life, and so he autographed that, and he drew a little picture of Heimlich in it, and says,
Oh
"Hi,
my
Jim."
gosh. That's so
Yeah.
cute.
So again, you never know any of these things. So started off writing those books, and when I moved to, I'd always had the interest in Disney, but when I moved out to Orlando, unless you're working, the only thing here in Orlando is the hospitality industry. So if you're not working at a restaurant or a hotel, you've got to work at a theme park. And so I was working at Disney, and I developed over 250 different presentations on Disney history. Because, again, sometimes they would drag me out and they would go, well, Kodak is debating whether they want to renew their contract. Can you go and tell them about Disney history, and can you tell them about the connection between Kodak and Walt? Feld Entertainment that is doing Disney on Ice doesn't seem to get the Disney characters. Can you go and talk about, Disney's background on ice capades and things like that? So I developed, and so some of those have formed the core for many of the books that I have written. And one of the reasons I've done so many for Theme Park Press is because I really like the publisher. Because I've gone through several bad publishers before.
Yeah, can you tell us about that experience, like your first publishing experience?
Absolutely. And in fact, those of you out there who are looking to sell your Disney book, first off, I would recommend my publisher, because without hesitation. But what you should do is go out and take a look and what publishers are publishing Disney books, and take a look at those books, and do you like how that book is done, and all of that. And the very first publisher that John Cawley and I had for our first animation book was a crook. I don't know if I should say his name or his publishing company, but again, he just had personality plus. It's like, boys, we're going to make you a star, and I love your work. This is the best thing I've ever read in my entire life. And, and you don't realize that unless you're a J.K. Rowling or a Stephen King or whatever, your books don't make money. That's why you have to write a lot of them, because if each book makes a little bit of money, it starts to add up. So again, all of this, and we gave him these rare photos we had, animation and all that, and he literally ruined several of these irreplaceable photos in the production book for this, and we did not see one penny from whenever we talked to, and boy, John and I ran ourselves ragged. We did book signings at bookstores, because in those days you also had Vroman's and you had Walden's and Pickwick Bookstore, all of these, and we sent out our own publicity releases and all this. And this is the other thing for those of you who want to be an author. You're going to have to do your own marketing. You're going to have to do your own publicity, because even if you have the best publisher in the world, next week that publisher is releasing another book,
of course,
or another 10 books, or another, and so you're the one who has to go out and, get that recognition out there. But anyway, this guy was an absolute crook, and not just to us. He had a line of books where he was publishing pop culture topics. So there was a book on Man from U.N.C.L.E. and on the Avengers with John Steed and Emma Peel and things like this. But we didn't realize it at the time, the reason we weren't getting any money is he was racking up lawsuits, because all of these companies were suing him for using proprietary material. And he was just ignoring them, figuring that he was just such small potatoes that they wouldn't, keep pushing any of that. And eventually he moved overseas to try and avoid all of these legal problems, and he was killed overseas. Yes. And we don't know what, to this day, we still don't know why. Whether, some of this bad stuff followed him over there, or once he moved over there, he acted like the jerk he always was, and somebody else took offense at that. But so it was like, oh my! And he tried to copyright everything, the entire book. But John, my co-author John, was so sharp that he had put copyrights for him and me throughout the book.
Good.
And the publisher was just so. What do I want to say, dense or whatever, or nobody else had ever done that. He didn't pay any attention to that. He just stuck on the title page, copyright his company. And so, the books reverted to us, and Theme Park Press is going to be reprinting those. Then we went on to Malibu Press, which I can mention because they were just terrific guys. They were later bought by Marvel because they had a comic book line, and Marvel bought the company because they didn't want their comic book line competing with Marvel. And Malibu Press is the one that released the comic book Men in Black.
Oh, okay.
Among other things. And so Malibu Press, Tom Mason, Dave Ulbrich, all that, terrific people. But one of the things you also learned is that publishers have certain things that they want, that they think will sell. And so it may conflict with how you want your material presented. So you have to realize that. And again, I come from an acting background, and I was a pretty good actor, and I got a lot of awards and a lot of recognition and things like that. But what made me a better actor is when I got experience as a director, and when I got experience working backstage, building sets and doing lighting and all that, I got to see the rest of the picture. Because when I was an actor, I would sometimes be insufferable because I felt every single moment I was on stage, I should be acting. And, everyone should be looking at me and all that.
I'm ready for my close-up.
And some people just absolutely love that, and they go, my gosh, Jim is just, incredible. But when I was a director, I go, boy, Jim the actor was really a jerk, because for this particular scene, this character really needs to be in the background here. So as an audience, we can focus on this part of the story over here for that to happen. And, when I came out to Florida, the first publisher that wanted to publish my Disney book, again, was, yes, you're going to make a fortune, and never saw one penny from this guy. And I'm going to build this huge publishing empire and whatever. The publisher I have now, Bob McLean, really has a good, sense of business, and also constantly wants to learn and constantly wants to take chances, because you never know what book is going to sell. You never know what book is going to grab people's attention. I wrote a book that I thought, my gosh, this is going to buy me a house. Called Walt's Words, quotations from Walt Disney with sources.
I have that book.
We actually used it in our last episode for our closing quote as a little teaser for you.
Oh, there you go. So over 200 pages. There's, 5 quotes on each page, and at the end of the book, there's like 20 pages of footnotes where every single quote is sourced. It's cited. So not only where did it come from, so that it's directly connected to Walt, it's not just a publicity release or whatever, And when did he say that? Did he say that in 1959? Did he say that in, 1932? Whatever, so you can put that in context. Nobody was interested in the book.
Oh. Well, we have so I think it'll serve us well.
and the sad thing is I have enough quotes for a second volume.
Oh, wow.
But there's no sense in releasing a second volume, and I am interested in charity, so eventually maybe it'll happen. But there's no sense in releasing a second volume if nobody's going to buy it. And in fact, I wrote a book called The Book of Mouse, which had every single Mickey Mouse cartoon annotated. So you had the credits of the director and the writer and the summary of the plot, and then the little fun facts, and not just the regular Mickey Mouse theatrical cartoons, but all of those oddball ones that were released, like a special Mickey Mouse sing-along for the Mickey Mouse Club in the 1930s, and the Mickey Mouse cartoon that was done at the Disney MGM studios, where Mickey goes into Michael Eisner's office and says it's time for a screening, and then they walk down the hall to the screening room, and Chernabog, rears up in front of them, and Michael Eisner says, "Please sit down. We're trying to watch this." And, "Oh, sorry, Mr. Eisner. Sorry. And goes back down. So all of that in there, the entire history of the creation of Steamboat Willie, including a chapter on all the fun facts, but of all the little references in there and what they, and all Mickey in the theme parks, whatever, book never sold. And so it got great reviews, got great people who did get it, loved it. But I had an outline because, as I said, I'm trying to work on several books at once to see, what's going to become soup first. Everything's there, but it's not soup yet. And so I was going to do another book on Donald Duck, which would have been similar. But since Mickey Mouse didn't sell, no Donald Duck book. Now, on the other hand, The Vault of Walt, which I thought was going to be the only Disney book I would ever write in my entire life, because nobody else would be interested in this. And I tried to, sort of stack the deck, because Disney fans are always interested in different things. And so, okay, let's do some Walt stories, then let's do some stories about, film and TV and all that. Then let's do some stories about the theme parks, and then let's do those miscellaneous stories, like Walt's housekeeper who died a multimillionaire, and she didn't even know.
Yeah, I'd love to jump into Vault of Walt there. But that's certainly, I'm sure, one of your most prolific, since it's already up to its 8th in the series. And you say in the first one, think of this book as a Disney history companion, filling in some of those nooks and crannies that may only be mentioned in a brief sentence or two, if at all, in other Disney history books. Why do you think some of these smaller stories have gone untold in other history books?
Because, again, everybody likes to look at the typical things. Oh my gosh, Mickey Mouse, the first sound cartoon, Snow White, the first, feature-length animated cartoon, Disneyland, the first theme park, all of this, and there's just so much in Disney history that a lot of things just get, lost in the shuffle. For instance, if I told you guys, and you were obviously both knowledgeable about Disney, and I said, what was Walt's favorite hobby, at the time of his death? And I would bet that some of the listeners now would be saying, oh, well, it must be trains, or maybe it's miniatures. I know he has a little miniature collection. His favorite hobby? Lawn bowling.
Ooh, would not have gone there. Yeah, I was going to say trains.
Yeah, not only was it his favorite, but he was part of the Lawn Bowling Society out at the Smoke Tree Ranch in Palm Springs. In fact, the bowling green out there, he designed and built. It's still there, and they still have a Walt Disney lawn bowling trophy that is awarded each year. He was also part of the Lawn Bowling Association in Beverly Hills. When he flew out in 1964 to Washington, D.C. to get the Medal of Freedom from President Lyndon Johnson, he stopped before he went to Washington, and he had taken his entire team to a lawn bowling competition in his state on the way to Washington. And Walt also had plans to take them, before he passed away, unfortunately, to take them to Australia for a lawn bowling competition. And again, it's like, what? What? I thought I knew
No one
Walt
hears
Disney.
about that. Yeah.
Right.
And
thought
so
all this time.
I've included that in the book, Call Me Walt, which again doesn't sell. And also in Call Me Walt, I listed the names of Walt's dogs and all of his dogs. And I listed the name of Walt's cat that would curl up in his lap at home while Walt was sitting in his favorite chair reading through scripts. He had a black cat that would curl up in it, and then the tragic disappearance of that cat. And now you're going to have to buy the book in order to find out that.
Absolutely.
But again, there is so much that happens in the Disney company. You know, we talk about, the Disney Cruise Line. Yes. Before the Disney Cruise Line, what they were planning to do was they were planning to take an oil tanker and make a theme park that would travel around the world.
Oh, my goodness.
It would be 5 decks, and it would go, to some place like Hong Kong and dock there for 2 to 3 months, and then sail to another port and not come back to that port for 4 to 5 years. And so there were designs, there were plans for that. There was going to be an Aladdin attraction. There was going to be interesting. It was going to be, they were going to have Small World, but it was not going to be a water flume. They were going to use the omnimovers, the same things you see in the Haunted Mansion and all of that, because you don't want to have that water on deck, because it works against the balance there for that to happen. And in fact, besides that, it would also be accompanied by a second ship that would have the cast members and the operators, so that there would be more room on the ship for these 5 decks of attractions. And because there are some countries that, they can't afford a Disney theme park, or there isn't enough of a population to support, a year-round theme park. But suppose a theme park came there for 2 or 3 months, every 5 years, you might want to go to that. You might, Disney might generate enough, revenue for that to happen. So there are all of these things, and you can't get them all in. Neil Gabler's book, his biography on Walt Disney, that's over 800 pages. And a lot of these things just not mentioned at all, even in 800. And again, you take a look at that, and those of you who are aspiring authors, keep that in mind. You have to look at this from the standpoint of your reader. Just as we talked earlier, that as a teacher, you may think, and again, I was a middle school teacher, so, I'm in love with the sound of my own voice. And, I think that what I'm saying are pearls of wisdom that are going to change your entire life. What is your audience? What is the story that your audience wants to hear, and how do they want to hear it? When I take a look at Gabler's 800-page book, as much as I love Walt, that's pretty intimidating.
Yeah, I have it, but I haven't tackled it. Just, it's like, when is the time?
And then you take a look, and it's like, how do I find, the things that I want to find? I have found that, if you go for about 200, or so pages, that's a good size. And you will also notice that in my books, I try to divide it up into small chunks. And also, I try to make sure that those small chunks are complete with a beginning, middle, and an end. Because, again, remember, as an author, the three things to keep in mind is tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. and so what will happen is people can pick up my book and they can flip to any page of the book and just start reading and feel satisfied, feel complete.
I definitely appreciated that as we were reading and preparing, because, as you're working, you have to make time to read, and it's something I enjoy, but other things come up. And so I was reading your book at the gym. So I'm like, okay, 30 minutes on the bicycle, and I could read a little chunk, but was able to, put it away until I was able to pick it up in the evening and feel like I was on succinct chapters. So that was very easy to do. So I appreciated that element of it.
Yeah, and again, I appreciate that as an author too, because as an author, one of the things you should do is take a look at the books that you really love. How are they put together? What is it about that you love? It's not just the content, it's sometimes how that content is presented. And there's just so many things to keep in mind, as a writer. And you have to realize that writing is both a craft and an art. And so as a craft, you have to know, you have to know the fundamentals. You have to know not to end a sentence with a preposition, You have to know how do you format, a paragraph, so it doesn't go on for the entire page. Where should you break that up? What should you do? Make sure you don't repeat, the same word twice in the same sentence. Get yourself a thesaurus. I have a thesaurus, by my writing table so that I can, what is another word that might, mean that same thing or might be a better word. And again, I'm one of those people who I love the feel of a book and love having a book in my hand. I know some people love Kindle and love having it on their devices. I have a friend out here who's visiting, and his wife has like 50 books on her iPad. And it's like, I don't want to read a book on an iPad. And my gosh, you got 50 books in there. It's like, doesn't that almost feel like a burden? That's almost like Jacob Marley and Christmas Carol. And you've got these chain of books you're dragging with you, through all of this, think what works for you. I'm an unusual author for a lot of different reasons. One of them is that the print copies of my books sell almost the same amount as the Kindle. And usually most books, Kindle will sell, 70 to 90% more than the print copy. But for me, I guess there's a bunch of old fogies out there who still like to have the feel of the tactile feel of the book in your hand there,
Yeah, for us, I know Courtney and I transition back and forth between Kindle and paper. We prefer paper, but sometimes the timeliness, like I have some of your books on paper and I have some in Kindle because I was like, oh, I need this for next week, or we really wanted a quote, so we got it on Kindle.
Them, bless your heart. Just so long as you have them, I am happy, and again, one of the things we talked about, because I don't think your listeners realize that both of you do extensive prep for the podcast. You don't just drop into that, and so we've had that communication back and forth. And one of the things that I wrote to you is that if readers want to see a book, they need to vote with their wallet.
Absolutely.
You've got to buy, and nowadays it's difficult. You know, some of the Disney books out there are $150. You know, the new Mark Davis book out there. You know, 150. When I take a look at $150, yes, my gosh, I'd love the Mark Davis 2-volume set. And in fact, I gave Chris Merritt a lot of my Mark Davis material so that he could incorporate it in the book there. But when I take a look, $150, I think of, there's utility bills that need to be paid. There's mortgage. You know, where could that 150 go? Again, and so that's one of the reasons that I try to write books that are going to be, you know, in the $20 range or under, because I figure, you know, that is affordable. You know, it's not going to be something that you can do every week, but it is affordable. That if this is something that you're interested in, and I try to provide value in my book, so that if somebody buys that book, they're getting more than $20 worth of material, that they're getting material that they won't find anywhere else, or if it is material that exists somewhere else, they're getting it with a new perspective. And
absolutely,
I'm still writing the book, so I guess there are people out there who like them, because as a writer, it's a solitary life, and you just don't know. You do, and you know, heaven forbid you read the Amazon reviews, because, you know, some of those are just like, what?
Never read
you know?
the online comments on anything is what we put.
And again, you know, I don't need to have my ego stroked constantly, where it's like, oh yes, Jim Korkis is my favorite Disney writer. You know, I'm willing to learn. I make mistakes, you know, and if somebody and I take them to heart, so that if somebody says, well, I really liked his book, but, you know, he keeps repeating this information, you know, and so it's like, okay, next book I'm going to make sure to double check that and make sure, you know, that doesn't happen, you know, so that I can produce a stronger book. Now some people, of course, are going to write books that are like, you know, this is my dream book and this is the way I want to write it, and nobody's going to tell me any different. I had a good friend, Jeff Gelb, who was the editor of a bunch of very popular paperbacks. One was a series of short stories by authors of horror stories. And he got one from Stephen King. And wow. Jeff is an excellent editor. And he looked at that and he goes, this really needs some editing. But how do you edit Stephen King? You know?
Yeah.
And so he didn't. And in fact, I think that's one of the problems that Stephen King now runs into as an author, is that his earlier books, he had editors who would go through and pare down and all of this, and it made it a stronger story. A good editor can always make your work stronger, because good writing is not writing, it's rewriting.
Of course.
But now that Stephen King is Stephen King, some of his recent works, some of them meander a bit, you know, and could use, you know, a focus. But then how do you go to Stephen King and say, well, you know, how do you go to actor Harrison Ford and say, could you say that line differently? Han Solo, you know, I don't think Han Solo would do it that way. You know, so, you know, you run into that situation. For me, I'm open to learning. Okay, what can I do to, you know, improve this? As a writer, don't fall in love with your own words. You know, it's not the 10 Commandments there. You know, it can always be improved. And one of the things that I've found helpful as a writer is putting something aside for a day or a week or longer, and then coming back and looking at it. And so, because as you're writing, you'll make several mistakes. You'll think you have said something because you're thinking it in your mind, but it's not down there on the page, you know. Or and also think like your reader. So you will notice that in my books, when I mention somebody, I'll identify who they are. So I won't just say Werner von Braun. I'll identify who he was, and I'll identify who he was at that particular point in the story, and I may also then identify him later when he has gotten some other, a position or whatever, so that people can figure out, okay, who is this? How does this connect? And one of the things that I get is, well, Jim, you're like a Disney archivist. You're like Dave Smith. And I said, I talked with Dave Smith, and we agreed that what an archivist does, and it's a valuable job and it's an important job, is you gather material, you preserve material, you catalog material. What a historian does is take that information and puts it into a story. Stories are very important because they appeal to both our mind and to our heart. And the reason that we all love Disney, and the reason we all love Disney stories, is because it's very effective, and when the story is not effective, it falls apart. For instance, why is Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast so popular, and yet you don't hear a lot of people talking about Hunchback of Notre Dame? Hunchback of Notre Dame, as a film, is technically much more proficient, is much more mature. It's the story. The story of Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast is pretty much the exact same story. It's the story that if you love someone enough, or they love you enough, the power of love is so strong that it can transform you. Not just, make you a better heart, physically transform you. Transform your tail into legs, transform a beast into a prince. This is a story we want to hear. The story of Hunchback of Notre Dame is that if you are loyal, if you are creative, if you are help your friends, the pretty girl is still going to end up with the pretty boy.
Oh.
That's the story of Hunchback of Notre Dame. And so that is why so many more people relate to Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast than they do to Hunchback of Notre Dame. The end of Pocahontas. You've got a really strong film in Pocahontas, and then you get at the end, you get John Smith going, yes, I love you, but, I'm mortally wounded, so I'm going to have to go on this wooden, bacteria-ridden, rat-ridden ship for several weeks back to England, rather than have you, heal me by, the native holistic medicine, because according to history, we don't get together.
That's what Pocahontas 2 is story.
And so all of these things hit on an emotional level, So again, we don't take a look at these things deeply. We just, Casper the Friendly Ghost. No, it's Casper the dead baby. And not only is it Casper the dead baby, you'll notice there are no bumps on the side of his head. So he's a baby who had his ears cut off before he was killed.
Oh no, I can never watch Casper the same way again.
Oh my goodness.
So again, as a writer, you need to realize, what is the story and how is this story being told?
I think that's wonderful advice.
And I've had so much fun with you ladies. I hope you'll invite me back on again sometime. And those of you, if you thought any of this was of value or of interest, then go look up my books. Jim
where
Korkis.
Can we find those?
Yeah, Korkis. You can go to Amazon.com. You can also go to themeparkpress.com. Remember that I'm an orphan. Remember that this is my source of income, as well as I still do some teaching and presentations. In January, I'm going to be for a week. I'm going to be talking to a university in Iowa about storytelling and how storytelling is different than plot, and how storytelling is different than theming.
Very cool.
Among other things. So, a lot you've heard of some of the books. The latest book, of course, is Vault of Walt, Volume 8, the Outer Space edition, which covers the Disney space shows that were done for the TV show, but also covers things like the black hole and Treasure Planet, and covers theme park attractions like how Star Tours was developed, and the Epcot Space Pavilion that never got built, and all sorts of other little fun things like Ward Kimball and UFOs, and how Doctor Who almost became part of the Disney theme park, that Eisner was working on getting that. So if those are the type of things, or since it is the Christmas season, Vault of Walt Volume 7 is just completely filled with nothing but Christmas stories, including how Walt himself spent Christmas at home with his family, because I knew Diane Disney Miller, his oldest daughter. She invited me several times. I was a speaker at the Disney Family Museum in San Francisco, so there's all those little stories and all of that. But my gosh, this has just been so exciting.
It sounds like that's the perfect stocking stuffer, too.
Oh, yes. And even, if you're a good little boy or girl, even if you're not a good little girl,
still, you
can stuff your stocking with this. But this has been so exciting to be talking about writing, and I hope those of you who are listening, writing is in your blood. It is just there. It is running through your veins. And so if you really are a writer, you can't just say, "Well, I'm not going to write." It's going to come. It's going to come some way, and the more you do it, the better you're going to be at it. And think about it. Think about it as well as feel it. And I hope to read books by you guys one of these days.
So, listeners, our next episode is in celebration of the release of Frozen 2, which comes out this week. We will be adding to our fairy tale favorite series with The Snow Queen, another classic fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen. So, returning to the previous author that we read for The Little Mermaid. Warning, this episode will contain some spoilers, so be sure to not only catch up on the fairy tale, but also watch the latest Disney animated feature film ahead of the podcast.
I am looking forward to seeing the film this weekend and reading the story, so I can't wait to talk about that with you soon. In the meantime, you can follow us on social media at Book of the Mouse on Twitter and Instagram. You can email us with comments and ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. You can follow me, Courtney, on Instagram at GreatGuthsby, or on Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
And you can follow me, Emily, on Instagram and Twitter at the same handle, at Emily_McD. And in the show notes, we have linked Jim Korkis' resources to his theme park press author page, his Amazon Books page, the best place to find his books, and his Cartoon Research Animation Anecdotes webpage, which has some really great articles about classic cartoons as well as Disney cartoons.
Before you go, we do have one request. We always have our author or our guest close with a little quote. Do you have one to share with us and our listeners?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I am going to share a quote about books from Walt Disney that does not appear in Walt's words.
Ooh, exclusive.
And this, because, again, this show is so special, and you ladies obviously have such a passion for books and all that. I wanted to have something very special there. So this is from 1959, and this is from Walt himself. You know, it's not from the publicity writers like Joe Reddy and all of that, or Marty Sklar or whatever. And so this is the quote from Walt. "There is more treasure in books than in all the pirates' loot on Treasure Island and at the bottom of the Spanish Main. And best of all, you can enjoy these riches every day of the year."
Oh, well, we certainly do here on this podcast, and we are so grateful that you came to share those treasures with us today. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. That's very kind. And for all of you who are listening, may all your Disney dreams come true.
Book of the Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.